Director.
All right, thank you very much. As noted, Giulio Bonifacio, Executive Chair. I stepped in as Executive Chair last year, and we've made a lot of gains towards what we're ultimately trying to accomplish. And with this overview, give you a sense of those accomplishments and what we intend to do on a go-forward basis. Cautionary note, obviously look at it. Of course, I'm going to be putting forth some forward-looking statements specific to the information that we have at hand. We formerly were called Cañariaco Copper Corp. We changed the name to Alta Copper Corp. That signifies a change with respect to the company and what we propose to do on a go-forward basis. The company has been in existence, the predecessor company, that is Cañariaco Copper, for, well, since 2004. The founder and CEO and president is Joanne Fries, so I work very, very closely with her. I've been in the copper space for plus 20 years, in the mining space for plus 30, almost 35 in fact. I do like copper a lot. I think copper has a real opportunity. I also believe that there's just not that many advanced development copper projects out there that are available, without a doubt. And this one has a level of work done on it that to replicate, you'd be probably looking at least $150 to $200 million, which is what drew my attention as a shareholder initially, and then stepped on as a non-exec chair, and then, as I noted, recently exec chair. Advanced stage development project in a space that is moving in a certain direction. Peru, to be very clear, is a good jurisdiction. It's the second largest copper producer in the world. We've got good support from the community, but you have to work with the community appropriately. So at the beginning of this year, we put in place a financing. It's approximately 75 cents with Fortescue Metals. They're a $60 billion iron ore company. They've got a lot of interest in this project. They've been invested in the project as early as 2020. Their average cost is about 60 cents post-consolidation. They clearly want to see us advance it. There's an opportunity here for all shareholders relative to this group potentially stepping in. We moved to a new team, new strategy. Well, when I say a new team, I've been added. We've added folks to our community team. We've added folks on the technical side. Joanne Fries and myself work very, very closely together, and I think we've made some good strides towards what we're trying to accomplish here in the next 12 to 24 months. When you look at upcoming value catalyst, there was a previous pre-feasibility study that was filed in 2011 that looked at producing north of 300 million pounds of copper per annum. We have recently, as of last year, put out a preliminary economic assessment that looked very attractive, but it was more focused in on, can you build a project on a stage basis, lower the capital on the front end, use the cash flow from the project to advance it further. We clearly demonstrated that we could, but for a project of this size, single asset, multi-billion-dollar project, when it's all done and said, we're not going to be the builder of the project. What we can do effectively is we can focus in on our core skills. That's advance the resource by way of the drill bit. I do want to talk about that, and I'll speak to that shortly. But if you look at the project historically, the last time it was drilled was in 2013, 289 drill holes, approximately 85,000 meters, for a system that already represents plus 16 billion pounds of copper. To be exact, 14 billion pounds of copper, 4 million ounces of gold, 90 million ounces of silver. There's plenty of opportunity to grow that. This could arguably be a generational resource. There's a reason that Fortescue's involved. They looked at the resource. They're very pleased with what they see, but they want us to drill, and I would agree with that assessment. The major catalyst from my standpoint, though, is the economic study. Do we have an economic project? Well, we've already demonstrated that we do, but at the end of this year, and likely at the end of this year, it could trickle at the beginning of next year, but we're targeting the end of this year, we'll come out with an optimized preliminary economic assessment that builds off the previous pre-feasibility work, feasibility work, it's advanced study stage, and it's going to look at what does this project look like if it's going to be processing at 110,000 tons per day. How much copper is it going to produce? How much gold? How much silver? And what you'll find is that it's going to be very, very significant, plus 150,000 tonnes of copper per annum, or approximately 325 million pounds of copper, gold and silver as well. So there's opportunities to fund this appropriately, but first order of business is re-engage with the community. We've done that very successfully. Move forward with re-engaging and getting our drill permits back in place so we can start drilling next year. We're going to be making an application for drill permits, filing that shortly. Expect to get approval by Q1, possibly earlier, and then move forward with that drilling program and then use that as a basis to continue advance value to the project. I personally, as a long-term copper player with equity, involved with two previous companies, have done well, very well by. Look at the markets. The markets are challenged right now. They just are. There's not many buyers. There's lots of sellers. I think our share price is held in reasonably well. The purpose of the name change is to demonstrate we're moving in a different direction. But also we did a share consolidation to clean up the structure for purposes of what we do next. We've held in reasonably well. And it's all about bringing in investors that appreciate what this represents over the next 12 to 24 months. But those investors should appreciate that very few copper developers have a group like Fortescue in the background. And that they should pay attention to. They own 25% of the company. They have a preemptive right to maintain that interest. They will do that at all times. Recent financings, we also did a financing with Whittle Consulting. They wanted to get involved with the project. They believe it's a tier 1 asset. They're working with Ausenco on this preliminary economic assessment. It's progressing very, very nicely. But when you break down the numbers here and you look at the catalysts and you look at the groups that are involved in terms of third-party validation, you've got Fortescue, you've got Whittle Consulting. The intent is to talk to other groups, and we're having very good discussions with a lot of different groups. But bearing in mind that I'm a fairly large shareholder, as is Joe and Freeze, we're going to do what's best for the shareholders, mitigate dilution as best we can. We have a lot of skin in the game. That's what it's about. That's how you make money in the space. You look at this slide, I will say as a guy that's been in the space, I'm a CPA by training, been in mining for a long time. I understand every stage of development from exploration, development, advanced development, production, construction. I understand every process that goes within that, project debt, project capital, and how that all comes together. But this slide kind of gives you just a bit of a snapshot. It demonstrates that, hey, here we have a project that's copper equivalent, north of 16 billion pounds. Most of it's in measured and indicated already. That allows us to move to feasibility. We have economics that are probably far preferred than many on this slide. I'm not taking anything away from the supposed other developers, but you look at where we trade, there's a clear disconnect. But many of these companies do not have a captive purchaser in the wings that want to buy an asset like this because they know what it represents. They understand what the next cycle represents. I think that's a key area that should be focused in on for any prospective investor that steps into Cadente. If you look at benchmarking where we sit, modest market cap around 35 to 40 million, we do believe we'll change that. And we'll do that on the back of what is the driving force on value. It's value add by way of the drill bit. The economics we come out with at the end of the year will be very, very attractive. Entering transactions that make a lot of sense from a value add perspective. The market will follow, doing more of these presentations. But you have to appreciate that because the company's been in existence for such a long period of time, you have to work through some of the historical issues, and we've done that very effectively, I would add. Gives you a sense of the shareholder registry, and as you can see, clearly you have Fortescue at that level. We have a strong Peruvian shareholder base. We have a retail base that moves up and down and an insider base that continues to increase. You can look at my insider trading reports. You'll see that I've accumulated a position. I'll continue to accumulate a position. I'm very comfortable with what the proposition looks like. Am I more comfortable because I see Fortescue in the background showing this much interest? Of course I am. It just puts a further pin in the ultimate valuation of this project. Our enterprise value, very modest. Our market cap, very modest. If you look at the trading volume, rather light. Folks are positioning. You look at the share price chart if you wanted to get into that level of detail, and you can see that it's trading sideways. Eventually, it'll start to gap upward. But how does it gap upward? By way of transactions that add value, by way of project value add initiatives. Location of the asset. We've got a road from Chiclayo into the project, 7-hour drive by road. We've got power access. We've got great infrastructure that's available to us, low power costs. We've got a highway to the north that we could tie into for purposes of shipping the copper concentrate. We've got port facilities as well. So it's a well-located asset. It's northern Peru. They want this project to move forward. They gain 50% of the tax burden on this project, so it's a real important aspect of what goes on in northern Peru for Lambiaca. We move forward again to the project location. This is Norte. That's the camp facility. Elevation, high Andes. We're looking at about 3,000 meters. That's very achievable. We're not talking about 5,000 meters, 6,000 meters. We're talking about 3,000 meters. The pit, the mill facility will be in the 2,600 meter range. So it's well laid out and designed. Now this is a very interesting slide, and it's really what caught my attention. On the back of a limited amount of drilling of 85,000 meters that stopped in 2013. And the rationale back then made perfect sense. It was about how do you take this project to the next level, to feasibility. They completed 50% of feasibility. Markets turned. Copper went to $4,000 a tonne. No copper developer was advancing appropriately at that stage. So it was care and maintenance, very little activity on the project from 2015 to 2021. That has changed. Community. Of course, we have to demonstrate to the community that they're going to benefit from this. And now they're starting to see our activity again. When we do a drilling program, we'll employ a considerable number of the community members. In the last drilling program, we employed over 250 community members. Those are the things that will occur that will allow us to establish the community agreements that we need to take this project forward. So it's really about how do we de-risk it. But when you look at, hold on, got a little ahead of myself. When you look at where much of the deposit sits, that's Cañariaco Norte. Most of that's in M&I, so we could move this to feasibility, which is our intention by the beginning of next year, possibly Q2, for the purpose of commencing the timeline on permitting with Synopsys. That's the intent, so it's a clear direction. Cañariaco Sur has only had 15 drill holes, and you can look at the endowment to date. I mean, that's significant. Now, there was some commentary on arsenic. Of course, this project does carry an arsenic, and it's not a clean copper concentrate, but it is a saleable material. The copper arsenic content life of mine is about 1%. That's low by comparison to certain other groups. Now, can we mitigate that? Can we blend it with Sur that has no arsenic? Of course we can. Are there areas within Norte that carry lower arsenic, higher copper? Of course. The geological modeling that we're going to put forth, or that we've done, excuse me, and we'll likely come out with a press release in the coming weeks. It shows what targets are available to us. But if you look at some of the historical sections on Norte alone, several holes bottom in mineralization. There's no better way to add value on a project than by way of the drill bit, and that's what we intend to do. So when you look at Norte, Sur, and Verde, 3 different porphyry systems, 4 kilometers top to bottom. Is there an opportunity there? Of course there is. Every single group that's looked at this project, inclusive of Fortescue, has looked at that in a very serious way. The resource table, you can look at the various grades. It's a very good grade for an open pit. Strip ratio is 0.66 to 1. The economics that you'll see come out at the end of the year will be very favorable in my estimation based on what I've seen to date. The previous economics that I'll speak to, I can highlight what that looks like. But again, that is a stage build. Will not be as leveraged to copper and what occurs in the first 10 years as opposed to what we're going to eventually come out with here at the end of the year. Now, this is a slide that kind of speaks to, hey, $1 billion NPV at 350 copper. Most copper developers are running it slightly higher. CapEx of $1 billion. Expansion by way of cash flow from the project that will occur in year 7 for another $300 million. NPV, IRR, very attractive. But again, this is based on a stage build. No large company is going to build it this way. They're going to look at what does a project like this look like? What is the optimum returns? How do I do it? And the benefit we have on this project is it's got a soft rock component to it. It's going to be with 1 SAG mill, 2 ball mills. CapEx will be higher, but the returns in the first part of the model will be very, very significant. You look at life of mine based on the study that I'm going to highlight here, 173 pounds. But you can see in the first 6 years, 120 million pounds. Subsequent 22-year period, closer to 200 million pounds. Based on my experience in the copper space, majors are looking for copper projects that can produce north of 150,000 tonnes. They're not looking for small. If you can't hit the 200 million pound copper threshold, you're going to have a tough time engaging with a big major copper company. And there's a key point there. Single asset companies of this size should never be developed within a company of this size. They need to be advanced, de-risked, and we intend to do that over the coming months, and you'll see that very, very clearly. And valuation will follow suit. Recoveries are very good. Strip ratio makes a world of difference relative to the margins that we create. But look at that C1 cost, $1.25. That's modest in the margins that it creates. Now, if you're a believer that copper stays within this range, it's created a new base at approximately $7,500 to $8,000 a ton. Sure, this is still a very robust, profitable project. Do I think copper prices go higher over a period of time? I really truthfully do. I think there's a deficit looming. You layer in EV and the green decarbonization thematic. Copper will go higher over a period of time. Does it happen in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? It will happen. China, and whether they're slowing, that'll eventually settle appropriately as you'd expect it to. But it's about that deficit that drives that copper price higher. There's not many copper projects that are of this size that can be advanced and developed and into production before 2030. And you just have to do the comps. But I'm being very realistic about timeline to permitting, construction capital, and also understanding very clearly from the outset that it's about a larger group that can do it effectively with the right team. Moving forward, before I move forward though, the opportunity to drill this out further is going to be very exciting. And there's recent examples in the space of projects that have been in existence for a long period of time, and they continued to drill it and they grew it, and the valuations grew significally.
Giulio, we are out of time, so maybe just
really?
a minute
Well, can I have another minute, or you want to do the questions?
1 minute. Yeah,
okay.
1 minute. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the heads up, because it is showing on the screen. My apologies, and I've done this before. No kidding, no kidding. Sorry. This gives you a snapshot of the returns. As you can see, post-tax and pre-tax, there's a big difference, so there's an opportunity there, but it's about leverage to copper prices going forward, but the next model will be significantly enhanced relative to what this looks like, because it's going to produce copper north of 300 million pounds. You've got the gold, you've got the silver. There's going to be nothing but opportunity. From my standpoint, very simply, it's about value add on the project and the transactions we can put in place. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Or wow, that was quick.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for attending, and I apologize for going over.
Yeah, no worries.